Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and this is going to be the CitizenCon show, or the pre-CitizenCon show, because of course CitizenCon happens over Canadian Thanksgiving, and so I will not be here. I will actually be away visiting family, so I will not be able to create a video. So generally I like to create these videos ahead of time, record them, put them up, and just kind of make a few predictions, and then we see what pans out after the fact. And there was one thing that caught my eye, which was one of the panels, the need for multiple speeds. And of course, one name in particular on that list caught my eye. And some of you will be very familiar with who and why. I'm a big fan of hover mode, big fan. So this, CIG is kind of talking about managing speed in combat, in a sense, slowing ships down for combat, because as you know, the faster ships move, maneuverability kind of goes out the window in certain axes. It certainly becomes much more pronounced and becomes very easy for a fighter with a turret or a larger ship with a turret to hit a fighter that's trying to circle it or chase it the faster they're going, right? So this has become kind of a problem, but you need those higher speeds because you've created a universe that is filled with locations where you have to manually fly hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers manually to get to a location, maybe near an objective where you can put a ground team down on the ground. You don't want to fly right into the enemy base. You want to fly further away and then drop your troops. That becomes a bit of a problem, right? You need to be able to traverse those distances at a reasonable rate. And arguably right now, Star Citizen has kind of gotten those travel speeds nailed. It's actually pretty damn good. But the cost of having such a large and expansive universe, well, there are multiple costs, but this is one of the big ones. Having this big and expansive universe with all these places that you can literally go to, it creates a problem that in order to traverse those distances, you need to move at those high speeds, but those high speeds have a really negative effect on certain ships in the combat area of the game. They do not perform well at those high speeds, yet every ship needs to be able to travel at those speeds. So this is kind of one of the big problems that CIG has. Now, a lot of this problem, I would argue, stems from Arena Commander. And the fact that Arena Commander back in 2014 was the first combat mode that we got exposed to. It was our first step out of the hangar module those many years ago. And it has been a blight on the game ever since because it creates a false expectation of what combat is supposed to be. It's a 20-kilometer bubble. I refer to it as the fishbowl, and everyone's fighting in the fishbowl and circling around one another. But then when you get into Star Citizen, all of a sudden you have to account for these vast distances, and you need ships that can travel these vast distances. Once you get speeds up to a certain point, all of that circle strafing and all of that just kind of goes out the window, and it becomes an entirely different problem when you might have the most maneuverable fighter in the game but get up around 100 or 1,000 meters a second, and that much larger ship can actually decouple and bring its main guns to bear on you while you're chasing it. That significantly alters the equation for combat, and it makes certain ships kind of sitting ducks, right? Because those larger ships can have, and do have, like a large hit point advantage, a large firepower advantage, which is only potentially stepping up. And there's still so many systems that are only just beginning to come into the game. And so the problem is that these ships obviously have a decided advantage, not just in combat, but in range and facilities that they can carry. So you kind of take this large segment of ships, these fighters, basically small and medium, and you more or less make them detrimental to use in the Star Citizen universe. When you think about the vast distances that you have to travel, and then you get all the way there, and oh yeah, man, now I got to stop and I got to get fuel and I got to do this, or I got to use the quantum drive that barely uses any fuel but takes forever to get there, like half an hour in some cases. It's kind of ridiculous. There's a lot of negatives to these things. So combat dogfighting obviously has been a huge problem. And so they got to figure out a way to lower the speeds of dogfighting to make it a little bit more even Stevens for these smaller ships, to give them more of a reason to exist in the game. Because as we get further and further in development, the reasons for owning them are diminishing. Now, or just beyond, nostalgia, or, just very specific interests, but you're very limited in what you can do with those ships. So here we are now, and CIG is finally seemingly ready to present a potential solution to this problem. Now, what I assume, what I'm guessing, what I'm predicting this solution is, what I feel like they're going to go with, is they are going to make it seem as though when a ship is flying at super high speeds, everything is going into the engines. Right? All the power is going into the engines, so you can't really fight. You can't really, your shields aren't really recharging. You're just all engines, and in order to fight, you actually have to get out of that travel mode and down into this combat mode, where all of a sudden power is now more evenly distributed, and all your guns recharge, your shields recharge, and now you can actually dog it out, but you have to move around at these much slower speeds. Right? You kind of feel where I'm going with this. But there's a problem with that. And the problem is simply that in order for that fight to occur in the first place, you have to assume that both pilots are going to shake hands and say, let's fight. Right? Like, if one pilot says, oh, well, I'm going into combat mode, and drops their speed, the other guy is moving at close to, let's say, 1,000 meters a second. The other guy drops their speed down to 120, 220, whatever. Then the other guy's just going to leave them in the dust and go, oh, well, see you later, bye, and just keep going. And when we're talking about speeds like 1,000 meters a second or something like that, there are ships that, even like cargo ships, that are up around that. 800, 780, still trucking along. If you all of a sudden drop your speed down because you two didn't handshake on the combat, you're out to lunch. You're no longer a part of that fight. You kind of say, oh, let's fight, and then they go, nope, see you later. So that kind of a solution doesn't seem to really gain ground. The other potential solution is, I need to be able to have a way to force you to shake hands with me, which is to say we both have to drop down to combat speed. And this, in order for this to work, if this is what they're going with, and this is, once again, this is me entirely speculating, and I could be totally wrong. This is Citizen Con roulette, basically. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It'll be funny. And the comments will be great. But if they do that, if they make it so that an aggressor can target another ship and force that handshake to where they both drop down to combat speeds, you are going to see a lot of people super, super mad. And you're also going to see some people are going to be flipping the F out, because think about it, that can be so greatly abused. If you can actually force another player, willing or not, down to a much lower speed so that other ships can get up on them and all of that, that is just gank city. That is absolutely gank city. Now that is a possibility, that they could make it so that one ship can drag another ship back. Will they do that? Will they introduce a stasis web of fire to Star Citizen? I don't know. Or effectively one. It's possible. I think really the fact that they called it master mode which is kind of I don't know. I almost feel like it's just implied like, oh, you don't fly in master mode? I kind of feel like maybe they kind of want to make it voluntary and then just kind of create some like implied social pressure like, oh, you're not flying in master mode. It's like, oh, you're playing arcade battles, not realism mode? You peasant. Potentially, but that was what I could come up with. That's what I could theoretically pull out of the air and just say, is this what they're aiming for? Because they have to find a way to lower those combat speeds, but at the same time, they want to have this big universe and they want to have us be able to traverse that universe in a usable amount of time. And these are really the problems that they're struggling with. I mean, they could make it so that a bomber like the Retaliator has to slow down in order to get proper lock-ons to target with its torpedoes, and we'll see what the Retaliator pilots think of that. It's very fraught with danger to tinker with combat speeds, especially, when you're charging real money for ships and people are expecting certain performances. And like I said at the very beginning, Arena Commander created a false expectation, and people assumed that they would be circle strafing each other, and it was just a matter of finding that right magic between jousting and circle strafing. That's what made the combat feel really good. But the problem is that people could travel at speeds well in excess of that, and nobody was trapped in that little bubble. So when you transition from Arena Commander to Star Citizen, the rules just kind of get thrown out the window. And even to this day, you see people out at Korea and whatnot still struggling with that transition. When they're trying to circle strafe the other guy and the other guy's just blasting away from them. And I think that perhaps the correct solution for now, for the immediate future of Star Citizen, the correct solution would be to not touch it and to leave it as is for the time being, and to just say, you know what, let's get more systems in the game. Let's get things like armor in the game. Let's get things like item quality in the game to where like, oh, this is the same gun, but 15% more damage for 5% more heat or whatnot. Let's get a whole bunch of things in the game, a whole bunch of systems, armor, shields, really in depth, and then come back to the flight system and say, now that we have all of this and we know how all these things interact currently, now we'll be able to make a much more informed change to the flight engine to better meet the expectations of the players. That would be my advice, would be to say status quo for the time being, and then, after we've got all these systems in place, after we know really how everything is going to work, then we can kind of step back and say, okay, now let's look at the flight engine and see what best complements the reality of Star Citizen. That would be kind of my approach to it. Is CIG going to go this route? I hope they don't. Because if you can actually force another player to slow their ship down to what is considered an appropriate dogfighting speed, I don't think so. And if you expect another player to just shake hands with you and go like, oh yeah, let's dogfight when I'm in a Prospector and you're in a Saber, that's not going to happen. So the combat speed problem is a very complicated problem. It's a very difficult problem. There's a lot of money and a lot of personal interest and a lot of emotions tied up into this one. So I hope that this is a lot more thought out than hover mode was. And I really honestly hope that I'm wrong. I really do. I've never wanted to be more wrong when it comes to Star Citizen ever. I hope this is not what they're thinking, because yeah, it's if this is what this is, it's not a good idea.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.